If gravity suddenly turned off for just 5 seconds, the world as we know it would be thrown into chaos. The most dangerous moment wouldn't happen while gravity was gone, but the instant it returned. Gravity is one of the most powerful forces shaping life on Earth. It keeps our oceans in place, holds our atmosphere around the planet, and keeps every object from massive buildings to tiny grains of sand firmly anchored to the ground. Yet, despite its enormous influence, gravity works silently and invisibly. We rarely think about it. But imagine that, for 5 seconds, gravity simply stopped working. At the exact moment gravity disappeared, everything not physically attached to the ground would begin to float. People standing in the street would feel their feet lift from the pavement. Loose objects, phones, backpacks, tools would drift upward into the air. Dust, debris, and water droplets would rise in every direction. Inside buildings, furniture and objects would begin to hover. Coffee cups would lift off tables. Papers would scatter through the air. Even the water inside sinks and glasses would begin to float as small spheres. For a brief moment, it might feel almost magical-like, stepping into a weightless environment similar to what astronauts experience in space. But this moment of wonder would quickly turn into confusion, because although gravity had disappeared, Earth itself would still be spinning. Right now, our planet rotates at about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. Normally, gravity keeps everything securely pressed against the surface as the planet spins beneath us. Without gravity, however, that rotational motion becomes a serious problem. Anything not firmly attached to the ground would continue moving sideways at the same speed Earth was spinning. As people and objects floated upward, they would also begin drifting rapidly across the surface of the planet. Cars traveling down highways would lift off the road. Drivers would lose all control as their vehicles floated and slid sideways. Aeroplanes in flight would suddenly lose the gravitational force that stabilizes their movement. Inside the cabins, passengers and loose equipment would float unpredictably through the air. Even the oceans would begin to react. Gravity is what holds the oceans against Earth's surface. Without it, enormous volumes of water would begin to lift upward into the atmosphere. Waves would break apart into drifting masses of water, droplets, and mist. In coastal regions, the sea itself might begin to rise and separate from the shoreline, forming enormous floating clouds of water above the planet's surface. But remember, this situation lasts only 5 seconds. 5 seconds after gravity vanished, it suddenly returns. And this is when the real disaster begins. Every object that floated upward during those 5 seconds would immediately begin falling back toward the ground. People who had drifted several feet into the air would slam into the surface below them. Furniture, debris, and loose equipment would crash down in homes, offices, and city streets. Cars that had lifted from highways would fall back onto the pavement. Some might land violently or collide with nearby vehicles. In cities, glass, debris, and construction materials would rain down from above. Aeroplanes that experienced instability during those few seconds might struggle to regain control. Some could enter dangerous flight conditions, but perhaps the most dramatic effects would happen in the oceans. All the water that had begun lifting into the atmosphere would suddenly collapse back toward the sea. Massive volumes of falling water could generate chaotic waves and violent disturbances across the surface of the ocean. In coastal regions, the sudden movement of water might trigger powerful surges or localized flooding. Even Earth's atmosphere would briefly behave strangely. Without gravity for 5 seconds, air molecules would begin drifting outward, expanding slightly away from the planet. Once gravity returned, the atmosphere would settle back into place, but not without turbulence. Storm systems could become unstable. Winds might surge unpredictably. Across the world, billions of small collisions, objects falling, vehicles crashing, debris dropping from above would create widespread chaos. Fortunately, 5 seconds is a very short time. Most buildings would remain standing, and the planet itself would survive the event. But the sudden disruption of gravity would cause injuries, damage infrastructure, and create confusion across the globe. And yet, despite the chaos, this thought experiment reveals something fascinating. Gravity is one of the fundamental forces that quietly shapes our universe. It governs the motion of planets, the formation of stars, and the structure of entire galaxies. On Earth, it is the invisible force that keeps our oceans in place, our atmospheres stable, and our bodies grounded every moment of our lives. Without gravity, even briefly, the delicate balance that allows life to exist would begin to unravel. So, the next time you walk across a room, set a glass on a table, or watch waves rolling across the ocean, remember that an invisible force is constantly at work beneath every step you take. Gravity may be silent and unseen, but if it ever disappeared even for just 5 seconds, the world would never feel quite the same again.